بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على رسوله النبي الكريم اللهم لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم اللهم لا فهم لنا إلا ما فهمتنا إنك أنت الجواد الكريم وقل ربي زدني علما السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. I'm glad you all can make it, and thank you for coming. And I know the schedule was a little, like you mentioned, a little bit pushed back. But nonetheless, this should be an interesting session. Mental health through the lens of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. It's a very interesting topic. Although I'd imagine we would have had a slightly larger crowd if the topic was a little bit more exciting. But you know, it is what it is, but inshallah we'll make it exciting, okay? This topic has been mental health as a topic has blown up, People are constantly looking into it and reading about it. And then there's the concept of Islamic psychology, which has also then, piqued a lot of people's interests. So it's important for us to understand what exactly this means from a prophetic point of view. Because mental health, right? The field of mental health is an idea. I don't know if this mic is working, but the field of mental health, the whole concept of it, is this idea that I want to ensure my well-being. Right? I want to ensure my well-being is all good. I want to make sure that my mental health is well. But from an Islamic point of view, mental health or wellness is not just through physical health, for example. Just through, when you go to the doctor and you're good, your body is good, you're considered healthy. But from an Islamic point of view, that's not it. That's not the only criteria of health. So from an Islamic point of view, you need your physical body, you need your mental health, and you need your spiritual health as well. When all three of these three areas come together and you have wellness in all three categories, all three areas, then you can say that this person is healthy. Because imagine a person who is physically well. Physically, their body is good. They're a gym bro, they run, they're an athlete, peak of their physical health in their prime. But when you interact with them, they've got the absolute worst qualities, the worst behavior, the worst attitude. The way they carry themselves is disgusting. Their views of the world, their views on life, it's horrible, right? Let's have these bros right here in the middle transition over this way. This middle row. Yeah. Let's just have you guys move over. It's okay. Get close to one another, but just, not too close. Yeah, there's plenty of seats for you guys. Sit. The brothers, mashallah, look at all the tables. You can sit right close in front of me. Get close. Yeah, it's good. The closer you sit to the fire, the warmer you are. The further you go, the colder you'll get. So, come on. No one wants to sit by me. That's okay. All right. Good stuff. So, like I was saying, a person can be in their the best physical health a person can possibly be in, but if their internal character traits, right, their qualities, their characteristics are terrible and miserable, then what's going to happen? That person's not considered healthy from an Islamic point of view, right? Or if a person is deprived of any spirituality, if that person is deprived of any relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you have no dhikr in your life, no Quran, no turning back to Allah, no tawbah, then you are spiritually bankrupt while you may be physically well. As Sheikh Hamza last night mentioned, Sheikh Hamza Maqbool mentioned such a beautiful comment. He says, mindfulness is the idea of clearing your mind of nothing, essentially bringing into your mind nothingness. This is mindfulness. Whereas muraqabah, the concept of reflection, right? This vigilance that he mentioned, is the idea of bringing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala into your mind, into your thoughts. Look at the stark difference between the two. A lot of Western academia, Western psychology has these things that are disconnected from spirituality. And that's just the way the West functions. But it's important to understand this, that true health is a combination or a culmination of both our physical well-being, mental well-being, and spiritual well-being. And so on that note, this part of this segment that I wanted to share with all of you is just 3 categories, 3 areas to highlight. And we probably don't got a lot of time, but inshallah, hopefully these 3 areas, 3 separate emotions where we can identify where mental health was exemplified in the life of the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam. So first category, love and romance. Okay, this is one area we can look into and identify. The second is sadness, sickness, or sadness and death. And then the third being sickness or physical, sickness, undergoing some difficulty in one's life. So before that, I want everyone to understand this and sort of let's get grounded on this theme here, that, perfecting one's qualities or characteristics, your akhlaq, the way that you express yourself or act, the way you behave, the way you think, all of these things are not, again, like Sheikh Hamza mentioned last night, it's not like an extracurricular activity you can do once you've achieved level 10 super Muslim. Now it's like, let me take a couple of extracurriculars, let me dabble in good character. No, it doesn't function that way. As a Muslim, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, in Surah Al-Shams, فَأَلْهَمَهَا فُجُورَهَا وَتَقْوَاهَا قَدْ أَفْلَحَ مَنْ زَكَّاهَا وَقَدْ خَابَ مَنْ دَسَّاهَا. Allah, by our very nature, has inspired our nafs, our base desires, to do good things, to commit good actions. فَأَلْهَمَهَا فُجُورَهَا وَتَقْوَاهَا. That our base desires, every human being, by the very nature of your existence, has the capacity to want to commit wrong and evil, and has the capacity to want to do good and get closeness to Allah. But it's whatever you further encourage that thing will become dominant. And then Allah says in the next ayah, right? قَدْ أَفْلَحَ مَنْ زَكَّاهَا. So complete success is to the person who was able to purify one's nafs, one's heart. And this is not purifying from like a surgical point of view. We're not doing an open heart surgery. But the spiritual heart, the heart in which we strive to perfect, to become better human beings. So Allah says, قَدْ أَفْلَحَ مَنْ زَكَّاهَا. Complete success is to the one who is purified, who has been able to purify his heart. From what? From the evil characteristics. أَخْلَاق رَذِيلَة. Right? And then he says, قَدْ أَفْلَحَ مَنْ زَكَّاهَا وَقَدْ خَابَ مَنْ دَسَّاهَا. And total loss and failure is to the one who has failed to do so. This is not just some spiritual, airy-fairy concepts here. This is true. And I'll give you some examples. Okay? When you interact with someone who has terrible, bad habits, right? They're always jealous. They're always angry. They're always talking smack, right? They're always negative, constantly pessimistic. You don't even want to be around them anymore. After a while, you're like, this is just too much, man. Like, I just need a break from you, You can't even be around people like that. And the reality is that when you're around somebody who is just chill, relaxed, problem-free, right? People gravitate towards you. They'll hit you up first and say, you want to hang out? You want to go somewhere, so-and-so, you want to do this, you want to do that? Why? Because there's something there. And that something is something real, which is what? Is how you carry yourself. And everybody here, I'm almost certain of it, can think of someone, if not your own selves, that is exactly like this in this example. That people with terrible qualities, what are they? Always pessimistic. They can't let go of the past. They're always jealous of other people. They're always talking about, I got to get money, I got to get money, I got to get money, I got to get money. And it's just like, okay, man, you're not going to get anything. Okay? You missed it. That chance is gone. Stop thinking about it. Oh, if I invested in so-and-so thing and I was part of this project and this is like, well, but you're not. But you're not. So you're not there anymore. Let's move on. Let's stop talking about this. There are people like that who obsess. And it's not just something you do once in a while. It's something that's like literally a part of their identity. That's how they're known. Right? Literally people will talk about like, oh, should we invite so-and-so? No, man, that guy talks way too much about whatever and whatever. I don't got time for that. You know? You have friends that are super political. Like, I don't care about these things. You know? Leave me alone. We're camping. I don't want to talk about this stuff. But the reality is that when you're around those people, you don't even like to be there. Now, why this is so important and why I say earlier this is not like an extracurricular class. This is a part of one's life. This is something that not only affects you in your religious and spiritual life. Having good character, having purified one's heart, affects everybody around you, whether Muslim or not. While you're at work, while you're at school, it affects everyone around you. So when you have all these terrible qualities, when you're looking to get married, right? When I teach premarital counseling, and I do premarital counseling, people always ask me, you know, like, oh, what should I look out for? You know, what are some signs? How do I know I'm ready to get married? I tell people all the time, what does your spiritual inventory look like? What do you do for yourself? How good of a human being are you? What bad characteristics do you have that you need to work on? Work on them now. Don't wait till you get married and somehow just coming up with these like crazy concoctions of what marriage is going to look like. This false Disney Channel image of what marriage is going to look like. You know, I'll show you the world or whatever that stupid song is, right? It's fake. Once you get married, you're not traveling. Your parents lied to you. You're not going to travel once you get married. It's not happening. So maybe. I don't know. But the idea is that we shouldn't have these false ideas of what that's going to look like. The reality is that you want to get married. You want to be a person that people like hanging out with or spending time with. You have to work on these character traits. So none of these things that we're talking about now is something which is so insular that it only benefits you in the masjid. It only benefits you like, oh, when I go to the masjid, when I go to my MSA events, when I hang out with my Muslim friends, then I should be like all super Muslim. No, because your bad characteristics bother everybody across the board. So when we talk about mental health through the lens of the Prophet ﷺ, the objective of the risala, of the reason why the Prophet ﷺ was sent, إِنَّمَا بُعِثْتُ لِأُتَمِّمَ مَكَارِمَ الْأَخْلَاقِ أو كما قال عليه الصلاة والسلام. He said, I was only sent for this reason. The reason why I was sent as a messenger was to perfect moral character. This akhlaq, this good character. And so we recognize and understand that there are different characteristics. There are positive characteristics. There are negative characteristics. Right? There's a really great book. I'm going to put a book recommendation out there. Write this down, or Amazon or whatever. It's called Reformation of Character. It's on Amazon. Okay? It has a burgundy cover. That book is an easy read, but it's a perfect introduction to this science, to this subject. It tells you, the first half of the book is on like terrible, bad characteristics, qualities. The other half is on positive, good qualities. For the negative qualities, it talks about jealousy. What is it? How to defeat it. Next. Anger. What is it? How to defeat it. Next. Thinking so good of yourself. This is another characteristic, right? Many of us don't even know what these things are. We didn't even know that malice, holding a grudge, is a bad thing. Spiritually, it drains a person. Right? A person has all these good deeds, but you're extremely jealous. That's like having a bucket of water, and then on the bottom there's a hole, and it's just dripping out. So you've collected all this good stuff, but then it's going away. It's leaving. At the end of the day, you show up Yawm al-Qiyamah, and you're bankrupt. You've got nothing. Right? That's a terrible thing. None of us would want that. So why not work on that now? So again, I want to highlight, again, a couple of main points here. Key takeaways. Number one, having good character, building one's character, and working on reforming one's character is a part of the objectives of nubuwah, of why the Prophet ﷺ was sent. Number two, this concept of mental health and wellness through the lens of the Prophet ﷺ, it's a concept which, mental health didn't exist now. It didn't come up the last, 10 years because there's a crisis and people are depressed all the time. This is something that has been a concept throughout history. Take care of yourself. The Prophet ﷺ used to go to the Ghar Hira, the cave of Hira, to do what? To get away from everything. He needed time for himself, right? He would spend up to 3 days there. up to longer periods of time there. And he would just get away from everything. That's self-care. We use all these, like my professor used to say in grad school, we use a lot of monkey talk. This psychological monkey talk. We threw all these fancy words, mindfulness and self-care and blah, blah, blah. Dude, just keep it simple, okay? Just take care of yourself, all right? And how we take care of ourselves, right? There's a whole methodology behind that. And there's a whole science behind that. So again, this is all prelude, right? And then now I want to just highlight those three categories. The first category was love and romance, okay? Why I chose this topic, I don't know. Maybe because I'm on a college campus, Maybe because there's a bunch of college students here. Maybe this is an interesting topic or category. So let's get into it, right? So love and romance is a very interesting, highly sought subject. I find, interestingly, that every time I have a workshop on something to do with love, romance, or intimacy or marriage, it's booked. It's sold out. MashaAllah, gets full within the first week. And then when I have a talk on like reforming one's character and how to defeat jealousy, there's like one person in his mid-40s who's showing up, poor guy, sincere, and he's just like, okay, I need to learn about this a little bit, So this subject is so important because of the fact that there are a lot of people who think that the idea, let's just say, in a relationship of being romantic or caring or loving to one's spouse is something which is kind of like beneath me, right? That's kind of like not really a good thing. I don't know. I don't feel like I have to do that. That's beneath being a man, right? To show affection or care or love. So I'll mention a few different things here. First and foremost, right? Sometimes a romantic relationship doesn't pan out. And it's important to understand that. There's a very famous story, I've mentioned it many times before, but there's a very famous story of two Sahaba by the name of Mughith and Barira. Mughith and Barira were both slaves during the time of the Prophet ﷺ. And they were married. And they had a child. But what happened was Aisha radiallahu ta'ala anha, she felt pity for Barira, and so she freed her. Now in the laws of Islam, if a slave becomes free while they are married, she has the choice to remain in that marriage or to be divorced. So she asked her, Aisha asked her, are you staying in the marriage or are you leaving? She goes, no, I'm done. I'm out. So she left. She got out of the marriage entirely. So then, for the rest of his days, Mughith, he was heartbroken. He loved her. So he spent, and there's a very famous incident where the Prophet ﷺ mentions this scenario. He says, everywhere for the rest of his life, that everywhere Barira went, Mughith would follow her. And, like a hopeless romantic, crying after her, literally shedding tears, chasing after her, oh Barira, take me back, I love you, I love you. And literally he would be crying such that it would like soak his beard. So once the Prophet ﷺ was with his cousin and he was just watching this. He was watching this whole scene manifest, like play out, okay? And he says, oh cousin, isn't this amazing, right? Look at how much Mughith loves Barira. And look at how much Barira hates Mughith. That she totally just ignores him and has nothing, like literally acts as if he doesn't even exist. So then the Prophet ﷺ, seeing this, he kind of addressed Barira and he says, oh Barira, if only you took him back, what do you think about taking him back and getting back together with him? So she said, oh Messenger of Allah, are you ordering me to do so? Or is this just a recommendation? So he says, no, I'm just suggesting. So then she says, La hajata li bih. La hajata li fihi. I have no need for him in my life. Now there's a lot of things that are very interesting about this story, right? Sometimes things don't work out. Maybe the story doesn't end happily ever after. But it's important for us to understand that these things existed then and these things exist now. So sometimes when we go through a relationship or an experience where we think that, I found the one, this is going to work out, this is fantastic, and then it doesn't, and then we're heartbroken, and then we're losing sleep, and then we're saying this is the end of the world, I have to harm myself, I have to leave, I have to, X, Y, and Z. Know that this is not something which is a novel concept, but this is something even the Sahaba radiallahu ta'ala anhum went through. And on top of that, this is a side point, but they had a child. Mind you, they had a child together. And yet that was never the reason why she decided to leave. She didn't say anything about the child when she said, I'm going to go. Whatever the reason was that the relationship did not work, they made that decision. She made that decision. And she decided that this is just not it for me, and she left. And this is important again, to understand that look at the grief that Mughith is going through. That he literally spent the rest of his life in agony, in sorrow, because of how much he loved her. But because the relationship didn't work out, she made her decision. She went on about the rest of her life, and he went on about the rest of his life. Unfortunately, chasing her, but still. So the idea here is that some relationships, they won't work. And you need to learn and to identify that. Look at what happened. Look at the scenario. Life goes on, and you need to learn to move on as well. This is one example of what love looked like for someone who didn't get love. And then another example, so totally 180 now. Look at the affection that the Prophet ﷺ showed to his wives. That literally when Aisha radiallahu ta'ala anha would drink from a cup, he would find the area where she drank from and put his lips on that exact area to show that I love you and I show affection towards you. This is a type of awareness, emotional intelligence, that the Prophet ﷺ is paying attention to the subtleties. And it's funny because between men and women, we function differently, right? We do. We are biologically different. So what happens is, when men generally, and this is just a general concept, right? There's exceptions always. But generally, men will see the bigger picture in things, right? We won't be able to see details in things, right? I don't know how many people are married. I'm not going to ask. Don't raise your hand either. But, often this happens where I'll come home and my wife does the same trick move. And she's like, notice anything different? And I'm like, oh God, not this. Why you do this to me? And I'm like, oh, no, I don't. And then she's like, how can you not tell the blinds are a completely different color? And I'm like, okay, so why would I care about that? My mind didn't even go to that. So the idea is that generally speaking, men see the bigger picture, whereas women tend to see details in things, right? There was one time I went to the restroom and there was this whole carpet and this whole, my bathroom was fixed up totally. I went the whole day. I was in and out of the bathroom, whatever, and she was just waiting. And that nighttime, kids are asleep, and she's like, so what do you think? And I'm like, about what? She's like, the bathroom. I was like, yeah, it's not clogged. And she's like, what? What are you talking about? Well, I'm talking about all the stuff on the counter, the flour, the carpet thing. I was like, oh, when is it coming in? And she's like, are you joking? And I'm like, I have no idea what you're talking about. She literally grabs me and she's like, look at this. I was like, oh, that's what was under my foot. Oh, okay. I was thinking it was a scratchy feeling. She's like, you're hopeless, man. But the idea is, again, generally speaking, men tend to see the bigger picture, whereas women tend to see the details in things. But here, look, the Prophet ﷺ is seeing the finer details. He's looking for it. He's looking for that thing. And this shows, let's come all the way on this side, inshallah. All the way down. And we could fill it up here, come in the rows. You guys can stand here. I know it's a little tight space, yeah. 10 minutes? Okay, got it. I'll try to wrap this up faster, inshallah. And then in another instance, the Prophet ﷺ's wife, Safiya, radiallahu ta'ala anha, one time they were going for Hajj. And when they were going for Hajj, Safiya's camel that she was riding on was a weaker camel. And it kept kneeling down. And so she felt like a burden. That, I'm holding up everybody, and everybody has to keep stopping because my camel keeps stopping, and I feel like, So she started to cry. Because she felt bad. She's like, oh man, I'm holding everybody up. So the Prophet ﷺ stopped the entire caravan. He came all the way to the end. He caught up to her. He brought her down, and he wiped her tears away. And now imagine, the narrator of this hadith is saying, and we watched that the Prophet ﷺ is wiping the tears off of the cheek of his wife. Now you have to also understand, right? These are emotions that are being expressed that generally to an ultra patriarchal system, it's very kind of okay, what's going on here, So for them to see this, it's all a teaching lesson, right? Everything is a lesson here. It's a teaching moment. So he's wiping her tears, then he takes his rida, it's like a big shawl, and he folds it like a little pillow, so he puts it on her seat. Then the Prophet, he sits up in such a way that he puts his knee up for her, So she puts her foot on his knee as like a step up and steps back on top of her camel and continues on their way. This is an open show of affection without care for who's around me, right? And look at how some of our relationships are today. It's like, I don't know you, don't talk to me. It's like a type of, totalitarian system where it's like, I run the show, you don't exist, you just shut up and move on. And unfortunately, a lot of this is continuously, propagated on certain social media platforms. But we have to understand, if there was ever anybody for us to emulate, ever, it's not going to be someone on social media. It's going to be someone who is perfect in every way and in every aspect of one's life. And that is the Prophet ﷺ. And I know some people, actually, someone told me this after Jummah. He was like, every time you talk, you give the example of the Prophet. And he's like, I love the Prophet too. But come on, man, like give another example. And I'm like, you give me an example of someone who is perfect enough for me to keep talking about. Who is the strongest man you know? Who is the best man to follow who shows and exudes manliness? Not that bald guy. It's not. That's not it for me, right? It's somebody else. It's the Prophet ﷺ, right? If you want to talk about strength, for example, right? There was a loud noise in Medina. It was like a horrifying sound out in the Badia, out in the outskirts. All the Sahaba got scared. Oh my God, what was that? I don't know. It sounded scary. By the time the Sahaba got out of their houses to go check it out, the Prophet ﷺ is coming back on top of a horse without a shirt on, and his sword is around his back, and he's like, go back to sleep, I took care of it. Come on, like that is like the peak of manliness right there. That is the epitome of strength. You want to talk about love and affection and care. The Prophet ﷺ, his son was dying in his lap. His 2-year-old son Ibrahim was dying in his lap. And he was sitting there holding him, and he was taking his last breaths, and he was crying, right? And so the Sahaba, they walked in on the room, and they're like taken aback, like, wa anta ya Rasulullah? Like literally, they did not know he could cry because they see him as what? Commander-in-chief. He's the leader. He's the warrior. He receives revelation from Allah. So they're looking at him, and they're like, and you cry? It was like such an odd concept. And then he said these famous words. He says, indeed, the eyes, they shed tears, and the heart, it is saddened and grieved. But we will never utter anything against the decree of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And in this is all the psychology you ever need in your life. Coping mechanisms, right? What happens when something happens in such a way that we're unhappy with it? Man, we will tear things up because it didn't work out the way we wanted it to. We will fight with everybody. We will burn down every bridge because things didn't work out the way we wanted it to. Whereas the Prophet ﷺ is literally holding, I have a 2-year-old daughter. So I think about this hadith all the time, and I'm like, man, I don't even know where I would be mentally. But subhanAllah, the Prophet ﷺ is the best example for me. Because I look at that and say, okay, I had a child, or I have a child, and had that child been in a situation like that, I don't know mentally where I could possibly be. But look at the Prophet ﷺ's example. He was crying. He was showing grief, showing sadness. And yet, the lesson, the takeaway was, I will never say anything against the decree of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. قَدَّرَ اللَّهُ وَمَا شَاءَ فَعَلْ. Whatever Allah has decided, that thing shall happen. And that's it, and I have to learn to accept that. These are all coping mechanisms, right? So look at, in the life of the Prophet ﷺ, we see physical strength, physical health. We see mental strength, mental health. And spiritual health, spiritual well-being, I mean, there's nothing to say. He was the one who was connected to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala through divine revelation. I mean, there's no more spirituality than that, right? And just like in closing, I wanted to mention this again, just to reiterate. This entire subject, this entire topic, everything we're discussing here, right, is about having, identifying mental health in light of the Prophet ﷺ's life, right? Now the reality is every aspect of the Prophet ﷺ's life was an example for us in physical health, mental health, and in spiritual health. The Prophet ﷺ gave in a hadith so many times, make this dhikr, recite this Quran. We know from the du'as of the Prophet ﷺ, du'as that are comforting for our hearts, right? In the example of the Prophet ﷺ, it's so interesting. When someone goes through sickness, when someone goes through physical pain, there's a food, comfort food, that a person is supposed to make. It's called talbina. It's like a type of rice pudding, right? It's literally like a type of rice pudding. And you would make that, and it literally says, the hadith mentions, that it is something that will alleviate the pain and make the grief go away. It's a food. It's a comfort food. So the scholars of hadith, they further clarify that how could a food item take away your grief and sadness? So he mentions that it's not necessarily just that you eat the food and you feel better. But look at this, right? When we feel bad, we also have those types of comfort foods, right? We have our chocolate, our ice cream, or whatever, our go-to foods, and then you kind of just feel like hanging out at the house because you don't feel so good, whatever, so you eat your comfort food, makes you feel better. So that lesson we understand, right? But the other part of it is that when you make talbina, everyone gets together, it's a social factor, it's a social element, people are talking, and that in and of itself, the social element of it, gathering people together, helps remove that pain and that sort of grief from one's heart. So there's so much more to be said, but I hope inshallah that this has been helpful and fruitful and kind of explains a little bit about how we can try to look at the life of the Prophet ﷺ to get our better examples from, as opposed to from any other source, and also how in the life of the Prophet ﷺ it is the best example of mental, physical, and spiritual health. I pray that this has been beneficial, inshallah. Wa akhiru da'wana alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen. Jazakumullahu khairan.